And next we have Steve McKnight, who's President and CEO of the Altoona Blair County Development Corporation, known to those locally as ABCD Corp. Good morning, Steve. Thank you so much for being with us.
On behalf of the Altoona Blair County Development Corporation Board of Directors, I want to extend our appreciation to Senator Ward and all the members of the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee for the opportunity to present this testimony relating to blight in our community. This is a critically important and highly competitive time for our community and economic development efforts. Never before have people and the investment they potentially represent been so mobile. That mobility is made possible by an unprecedented and ever-growing power of technology. It is creating new methods of production and instant communication. Customers can effectively be served and products produced and sold from essentially anywhere in the world. As a result, people are increasingly able to choose places to live and work that fit their lifestyle, corporate culture, and goals. While some will seek out big cities, many others will search for smaller towns, mountain Main Street communities like here in the First Frontier, Blair County, places that offer a solid balance between work, life, family, and friends. Regardless of the type of place people will call home, rest assured they will not compromise on the quality of that place. All communities must and are putting their best foot forward. Likewise, we must continually invest in critical infrastructure like roads, bridges, water, and broadband. But that is not enough. We must also ensure that we offer the best visual appeal, quality, and functionality in our assets, such as our parks, trails, schools, civic and cultural gathering places, our sidewalks, housing, and pedestrian connectivity. What people see as they drive through our towns or walk our neighborhoods says something about who we are. A judgment is made about how we value and see our future to be. Are we an optimistic bunch? Or does it appear we're giving up? Simply put, blight, whether it exists within the public or private realm, will hurt our chances of attracting people to our community and the investment that they bring. While there have been efforts over the years to ensure our public spaces are inviting and well-maintained, I would like to take time here to call attention to our private housing stock, especially within our urban neighborhoods. Why is housing so important? It's simple. People need a place to live. They demand high-quality, diverse, modern housing options at various price points. Most of our housing stock was built prior to 1940. Much of that is now in the hands of landlords who live elsewhere, increasing the chances of neglect and disrepair. At last count, more than 7,000 people in our labor force are aging towards retirement. Workforce research suggests that roughly 80% of those positions will need to be refilled. This is creating a significant labor force demand without even considering any net new job growth. And yet overall, our net new job growth is also happening here at just over 2% per year. This is good news, but between the existing job churn and new growth, the need to attract talented, skilled people to our community is our #1 economic development priority. If we do not increase our immigration count while retaining our existing workforce, we will not grow. Business operations could be threatened and disinvestment a looming possibility. Study after study show that the next generation workforce desires high-quality, walkable neighborhoods that offer a safe and vibrant living experience with diverse housing choices and price points. Communities that deliver that win. Those with an older housing stock, broken sidewalks, dimly lit streets, and generally neglected properties will not be competitive. They will struggle to attract people, business, and overall economic growth. ABCD Corporation has identified several steps as critical in the blight prevention process. 1. Continue to aggressively enforce current codes, laws, and regulations designed to ensure the safety and quality of our streets, structures, and neighborhoods. I'd pause here a moment just to recognize Mayor Pacifico and his team, who not only talk the talk but are walking the walk. And I've gotten to know Matt over the last three and a half years since moving back to my hometown, and there has been more activity that I would have ever suspected in moving the needle forward and moving the city out of Act Act 46 and taking on a serious blight issue. So his team, the planning officials and the code enforcements are doing a gangbuster job in setting the stage for future growth. 2, administer and fully fund the recently established city land bank and begin acquiring properties for redevelopment at greater scale and density. 3, work with state and local stakeholders to identify and create new gap financing programs that provide patient capital for higher risk, urban-centered, mixed-use housing redevelopment and adaptive reuse projects. This is a critical element. In pre-markets such as ours, we need to incorporate, in almost every case, some form of patient capital that will allow the market to catch up to that project in future years, 3, 4, 5 out. The return doesn't happen as it does in bigger urban areas in year 1, 2, or 3. 4, continue to direct public investment towards streetscapes, lighting, public spaces, and modern educational infrastructure. 5, continue to incentivize private investment through temporary tax abatements such as the LERTA program. These have always been useful tools in our economic development toolkit. And finally, in sub-market conditions like ours, we must find ways to appeal to our private sector community's philanthropic interests, encouraging them to invest in projects that will first and foremost transform a neighborhood, seeding our local market for future returns. ABCD is working very, very hard right now in communications with our local real estate development community and others to encourage this philanthropic participation in these projects. It's a best practice in almost all cases, especially in smaller communities across the country. If we live in the past, relish what once was, while neglecting what is, there will never be a what next. We must strive to be the best we can be to attract the talent we need. There really is no other choice. ABCD Corporation has been and will continue to partner with the city, the state, the redevelopment authority, area nonprofits, and our private sector partners to eliminate blight for the next generation to come. We look forward to working with Senator Ward and the entire committee to achieve that goal. And again, we thank you for the opportunity to present here today.
Thank you so much. Steve, you do such great work here in Altoona, bringing in business, retaining business here for us. And I know as a younger member of our community, it is, you see firsthand a lot of the issues with bringing people in, bringing businesses in. So your perspective is very important here today. I happen to have a bill that it's Senate Bill 352 that we passed out of committee one of our first meetings in urban affairs and housing, and it encourages mixed-use redevelopment of blighted properties. It provides the taxing authorities with the option to designate deteriorated areas within their communities and offer an incentive in the form of a tax abatement to developers and property owners who are approved to rebuild or improve the blighted properties. It's designed mostly for mixed use, which is maybe a business, some sort of storefront on the bottom, and housing on the higher floors. Mm-hmm. Do you think that would be something that would be useful in the city?
Yes, and yes. Absolutely.
You mentioned LERTA and those tools that we can use to help with blighted and designating blighted areas and redevelop those, and this is very similar to that LERTA program you mentioned. So.
Yeah, again, in pre-market conditions, and this is the qualifier, most of the time economic development organizations like ours are getting involved in projects because the private sector market, the market push just isn't there. So we have to jumpstart a lot of this. I mean, we once were a leading industrial center here way back, right, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. In that case, the market was there. We had some economic drivers in place. We have those drivers in place. They're just not there yet to the scale that a private developer would take the risk on these adaptive reuse, very complicated projects. Anytime, for those of you, who know you have these projects in your districts, the first tendency would be to tear the building down and build something new. And sometimes that's just not the desired outcome. We have integrity, we have historical integrity in these buildings, and they tell something about our past, so we want to make sure that we can reuse those. So we're in conversations with the private development community to say, well, let's walk that walk, and sometimes that walk can be a long walk and a painful one. So any tool that we would have at our disposal to limit the risk, level the financial pro forma for a longer period of time will help bring that private investment to the table, seed that market, and begin jump-starting some of these urban core areas. So yes, I think that that type of tool would be very useful.
Great. Other questions? Center Street.
One, I applaud your efforts. A question: do you think that I'm curious about the use of tax credits and the tax credit programs and how helpful they've been. But do you think that expanding the eligibility of people who can use and live in buildings that utilize low-income housing tax credits to include more people between the 80 to 115% sector of the AMI would be helpful?
I think those programs are useful. I think what's interesting though is the difference between the low income conundrum between smaller communities and big urban areas. A lot of our housing, just because of the stock that we have, is very affordable. So if you look at generally the urban housing stock, it would meet almost all qualifications of low-income housing just simply because of the market conditions that are currently there. Our challenge is the market rate housing. Because we're in a situation where we need to attract folks into the area from outside of the area, and a lot of times they're coming from bigger urban areas or areas that are newer. Their expectation for a housing option are the granite countertops with the pendant lights, and and our development community hasn't built those on spec. They build them on demand, and so it's sort of well, I'll build you something in the next 12 months, and that person says, well, I just got my job, I'm not interested in that. Where's the middle market or entry market for housing? So then that person circulates through and then ends up jettisoning out of the employment sphere. So our issue right now, our focus is on how do we tackle this market rate housing thing. And I think that a lot of these smaller communities are facing a similar dynamic. We have a lot of affordable housing, we don't have market rate housing. So it's the inverse of a lot of the urban challenges where it's not affordable to live. This investment has been happening in these bigger cities, and folks are getting pushed out or down, which is unfortunate. So, I think a one-stop, or one solution fits all is a tough one when we're looking at some of these markets. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's all good ideas. It's just a matter of where it fits most in some of these smaller markets versus larger markets.
So, follow up. So what about, so it would be more helpful to get dollars for, so if you had dollars that could assist in the acquisition of these buildings, so then you could develop them or make them available at a lower rate for market rate development, that would probably be more helpful?
Correct. Yeah, we've seen some demonstration projects here, fortunately led by the private sector. Again, that's that philanthropic point, and we've got a couple of those wins. We want to see more of that, but now those projects are actually beginning to produce the private return. But in those cases, we saw an expectation of what the rent returns would be or the lease rates would be on some of these apartments, and they were not optimistic. They were going to achieve sort of where the rates needed to be for the cost of the renovation that goes into the building, and it proven that we can reach those lease rates, meaning there are folks that are willing to pay for the finished product, but you don't know that until some of these are built. So yeah, the acquisition of the properties, the mitigation work and the environmentals. Like right now, the industrial sites reuse program is directed only towards buildings and sites that are formerly industrial uses. And in the case of our small town, if they were retail or office, which most of our Main Street, community buildings were, there isn't a similar industrial sites reuse program for those areas. So that would be something that would be useful to mitigate the lead-based paint, the asbestos that is in a lot of these buildings, similar as we've done for the brownfield sites or former industrial sites.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think some of the issues around the industrial program to help in the acquisition and mitigation of retail industrial reuse, I think would have applications to communities across the Commonwealth. And I think it's something we should probably look into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Argel.
Stephen, I want to thank you for the testimony. Your sister agency in Schuylkill County at SEDCO and I have been grappling with some of these same issues, and I'm going to share this. Mary Beth Doherty is here from my office, and she's staffing it. You've nailed the issue as well as I think some of the solutions, and we'll share this with the people on the task force back home, because as you'd indicated, in some of these even rural communities like Pine Grove and Pottsville and Tamaqua, we see the job climate much improved, but when I was in high school, we saw those business leaders moving to the community. They were the leaders of the Boy Scout and the Girl Scout troops. They were members of the local religious organizations. They were very active in the community. Today, it seems that they're much more willing, because of the reasons that you'd indicated, to live an hour away from the job site, pop the the latest audio book on, or just work on the phone all the way to and from the work site, and so we feel that that's a loss to our communities, because we want those kind of people to be our neighbors and to help us rebuild our communities. And so this is really very helpful, and we've been struggling with some of these same issues. I think you've really nailed both the questions and the answers, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can see, the committee can see, we have so many talented people here who are so dedicated to this city and to our area, and amongst the foremost of those is Steve McKnight. And I just want to thank you for your devotion to this area and all the hard work that you do. And I did have a question. Do you envision ABCD moving forward working with the new land bank?
Yeah, we'll be participating and open to sitting on whatever the appropriate structure is once it's finalized. We'd like to be a part of it, absolutely, and help guide where some of those areas are that definitely need to be impacted by the land bank's toolkit. So yeah, we want to be a part of it, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Steve.
Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony here today.